There we go. I'm talking about the Bardos. Always in a Bardo, but we are so, what's our habit? Our habit is to be so, I'm going to just use the word illusion. We walk around in that sleep in an illusion so much that we perceive, don't we, solidness everywhere. It's just not true. And yet we use that fixation, you could call it that solidifying, to make sense of our world, right? It's like this, you're like this, I'm like this. And we have to be careful, all of us, not to solidify our demands, and not to solidify expectations, judgments. And then from the recognition of the flow that we're always in, or we could say the Bardo that we're always in, the in-between state is what the Tibetans call it, the in-between state, we can learn how to rest there. And if we can learn how to rest a little bit in the Bardo, we can not be as compelled, not as impulsed, or not to as addictively grip what we want or what we think is supposed to happen or how we think it's supposed to go. And then with greater skill, open-heartedness, wisdom, right? We can act most skillfully. That's the idea. And in the action, which is all that compassion is capable of, only loving, wise, caring action, you are making your greatest contribution to the end of suffering, both for you and for others. And that makes sense to everybody, right? Don't we get it? Very hard to do, wouldn't it be? Just like extremely hard to do. We're gripping on to, right now I'm gripping onto an agreement. There was an agreement made, the agreement's not being kept. I feel saddened and disappointed and angry about that. And I'm like, yeah, I think if the agreements are off, they might just be off. And they might be, by the way. I'm not saying that won't be its result, but can I recognize that agreements, even in the greatest understanding, are not always lived consistently, and neither have they been lived consistently by me. And in remembering that, there is some greater room, isn't there, space for how to be most skillful and how to be most loving. Though I'm not feeling particularly loving right now to the other, what I have to also remember is that that's loving to me. That the most loving thing I can do to me is be skillful, wise, and open-hearted, whatever that result is. And I'm not stuck on a solution at the moment on that. So I'm not attached to the outcome at this point. And then what's the training? Well, we're going to do it. It's to recognize the grip, rest in its distress. Yeah, resting in its distress. Feeling the reality of the distress, knowing how we are, holding ourselves, right? Because there's not always somebody else there. Holding ourselves in the distress. And then when we can, in its time and without demand, opening to include the other. The other who we know in a conflict, in a confusion, in a misunderstanding is feeling just like you. Actually, it's feeling just like you, even when that appears impossible, right? Like there's no way. You're just being a jerk. It's not actually true that there is suffering in the other as well. Or if there's no other, there is suffering in you also, right? So we're going to practice with that a little bit. Whenever the real Bardos, every moment's a real Bardo, I didn't mean that. The bigger Bardo, the things like moves and divorce and conflict and death, they're no more or less real than this breath moment, by the way. They feel bigger, but they're not. Whenever those happen, we tend to get a more microscopic, much larger sense, don't we, of the Bardo, of the groundlessness of it all, don't we? The groundlessness. Who likes that? Nobody. That's why I want the agreement. That's why I want the agreement. I want the agreement because I want some kind of ground. And if you made the agreement and you don't keep the agreement, that's pretty groundless, isn't it? Now, what do you count on? And there is always something to count on, which I was just being reminded of. It doesn't mean I'm going to keep all the agreement. I'm not saying that. I'm not going that far. If the agreements are off, it may be that the agreements are off. I'm not sure how that will play, but can I recognize the suffering? And can I recognize my own desire to grab something called, okay, if we don't have agreements, we can have non-agreements, because that's something to grab too, right? So if you don't, no agreement, that's clear. I can hang on to that. That feels a little better than not knowing. And this not knowing is where we're always resting. We're going to do that now. Does this make sense? Everybody remember this practice? Yeah, you're sitting in the Bardo right this second. And even though it looks like you have a solid couch and you're in a solid house and right, yeah, Siobhan's like nothing. There's nothing. You're sitting in and on a cloud and you are cloud yourself. Right? And you are cloud yourself. You are that ever changing, ever, right, moving, ever unsubstantial, right? Nothing to hold on to, right? But there is something to rest within. And so we do. I see Carrie, I'm going to check and make sure we don't have any thoughts about this before we go.
Just what you said before, just last sentence about thinking.
Anything you want to say about this, Carrie? You're on mute.
No.
Well, I have to ask you though. No. Is that me or you? You must have some kind of
I can hear her.
You can hear her. Try to get her. Oh, there we go. That was my computer.
Okay. I'm just saying what you said, the last sentence about thinking about where you are in the Bardo and forgetting about how it feels in the body. Just always remembering that first.
Yes. That we always have to come home. I like the cloud image. Let's work with it, right? Don't you like that? Really, it is the truth. We are just an ever-shifting vapor image. Really nothing substantial. And we know this because we know we're mostly space, and then beyond space, water, and water in its ever-shifting, right? So let's practice with this a little bit. This ever-shifting reality and the intolerant mind, the grasping mind. But we're going to start by making contact with the body and see if we can't first remember and recognize its ever-changing dynamic. And so we're just going to turn the mind to the body as we do. And we immediately go to, isn't it? I'm laughing because I immediately go to, oh, there's the weight settling me. There's weightedness, pressure, contact, right? Giving me a sense of solidity already. And I'd like you to see if you couldn't imagine yourself as a fluffy little cloud or maybe a little body of water or air swirls. Get an image for you. I actually use a lot particles because of the particled nature. Tiny, infinite number of, they're not even solid particles, but just infinite little bubbles. Tiny bubbles of you. And can you feel your bubble nature rather than that false felt sense of solidity, pressure, weight? That's gravity, actually, not you. And let's just feel that sense of bubble, bubbling, bubble nature, little appearances and disappearances, like twinkling stars, they say, in a dark night, that are happening everywhere. In fact, there's so many receptor points bursting, you can't track them all. And then I'm noticing where I keep grabbing to root or ground. I'm noticing the bottom of the legs, the feet. And once you recognize you've just done the gripping, this is the good news. You feel liberated here. And then we open once again to this cloud being. Ever shifting, changing reality. And we're breathing in and out of open space. This is where the meditation can help so that we can't grip anything. If you feel like you're with the eyes closed, grabbing into parts, you may want to gently open the eye and just rest it in space. That's a part of why that practice is so important. Now, remember that the seeking mind always gravitates towards an object, right? And right now we're just turning towards the objects of sensation, but we grab those too, don't we? We solidify those as well. And so we're going to do a little practice with this in the body, but we're going to have to be watchful that we don't start gripping the sensation as a reality. It too is an ever shifting, changing, appearing and disappearing reality. I was just noticing the touch of the lips, and I could feel the mind make contact with that as if that itself were a solid object. Not so. And so we're going to move the mind down the cloud, this ever moving, vaporous, watery, melting and appearing, all the way down to that area that we're going to call the feet. But again, no such thing. There's really no defined space that are feet, by the way. They too, shifting, changing, particles appearing and disappearing. But move into the feet there, breathe in. See if you can make contact with that ever shifting nature of the feet, not the solidity. And then you see the infinite layers of the Bardo. The Bardo of the mind, ever changing, the Bardo of the self, arising and disappearing, the Bardo of sensations, nothing constant. vibrations, sensations, energies, temperature, moisture. See if you can rest in that general area and make contact with the ever changing, ever flowing reality of these solid things we call the feet. I just had a pulse in the big left toe. Then I had a little vibration over on the right side of the outside of the foot. That disappeared. I'm noticing a little coolness. And now, rather than make contact with the sensation, because we tend to grab them, this sensation throbbing, this sensation chilly, this sensation, right? We move from object to object as if those are solid. We're going to see if we can't rest in the space around, within, between sensations. Now, that may be tricky to do in the feet. If you notice that's too challenging, come back to the breath for a moment. And we can practice resting in open space here. Because we can feel the non-solidity, the non-concrete, non-fixed nature of the breath. That's why we use it. You can establish this space all around you. Remember all the space that is you. Imagining yourself that cloud, that screen door, that ever shifting, changing kaleidoscope. Space around and space within. Let's sit quietly for a few minutes, seeing if you can't make contact with all the places where that space it can be known. If you touch an object, remember you're touching into its continuous change. The Bardo of being, the Bardo of birth, life, death, and beyond. The Bardo of the present moment. Resting moment by moment in the open space, no ground.
See? I put soap in the washing machine. Okay.
Appearance and disappearance. We are tending to both. The arising and then the falling breath. the space within, between, and around the breath. And remember our practice of resting in the pause. Except the reality actually is that's everywhere. We use the pause between the in and out breath as a way of starting to make contact with shunyata, the vast, open, empty space that is everything. So touch in lightly to the space at the end of the out breath. Rest the mind wholly. The complete heart mind, rest it there. Does nothing but expand. And then rest there on purpose with intention as long as you can. But with a letting go, letting be, not with a hold the breath quality. That's another kind of gripping. Feeling the sense of non-solidity, unreliability, not meanness of the in-breath. Just another world with a cloud. The reality of our true nature is this: formless, ageless, deathless, birthless. And the more we grip, the more we suffer. The me who began the in-breath is not here. This is a different cloud. Different mind, different body. Different emotions. Different me. Sitting on a different chair. In a different room. With different words. And that's why we rest back in the open space. There's so much that is ever changing. It can become overwhelming if we try to hold it. And so we rest back a little bit more, create a little more space than just the breath. That's why we don't even hold the breath. Nothing to hold. And see if we can't rest back in that vast sky-like quality. And we don't even get to hold the sky. Appearances arising, that's why that word happens. Phenomenon rolling along. Those words are suggestions about the impermanence, the emptiness, the insubstantiability, the unreliability of all objects. See if you don't notice by virtue of the training that you have a little better capacity for making contact with an object than for letting it go. We even have lots of noun words to help us solidify dog barking. If you can't rest in the dissolution, in the non solidity, in the space itself. And then we can turn towards sensations or sounds. And we can include both, can't we, in the practice of seeing both their arising, but also their changing, passing, cloud-like, ever-flowing, insubstantial nature. I want you to feel the liberation that is available in this. Resting in the Bardo. Training for life and death. And those aren't so solid either. Birthing and deathing every breath. And see where the mind grips. You'll notice it as well in the body. See where the mind fixates. Right now, it's very handily resting in the bottom of my right foot. And I remember this too, ever changing. By checking in, I can feel sensations simply coming and going. No one solid right foot. The mouth is moist and dry, the eyes moving and still. We even have to surrender the image of the sky-like quality. Holding the sky as a static image is gripping something. Can we let go of even that? There is no one in or out breath. And then you can see why the breath itself is so valuable. Nothing to hold on to. And it isn't even objects, is it, that we grip so much? This is part of the training. But actually, what we grip are belief thoughts. We do that with substantially more force, demand, and wanting. Belief thoughts that it should be or shouldn't be like this. Just trying to find solid ground. We grip a feeling, we grip a need, we grip a perception, a preference, a bias. We construct a self exhaustingly, breath by breath. There is no quality of mind that is you. Conditions arising, appearing, changing, and dissipating. When you notice that the mind has perched onto an object, this is a moment of awakening. And then we smile in the recognition, once again liberated. And free. This is the definition of nirvana. No objects, not the practice, not the teachings, not the beliefs. We let them all go for the reality of this arising moment. And we can't know anything about it if we bring that preloaded script. We arrive in each breath newborn. For just a breath. We guide each breath. Back into open space. This is preparation for being alive. Reading the present moment. With no body, no identity, no establishment, no preference. The recognizing them all is what allows their spaciousness. Not avoiding them, denying them, but seeing to their insubstantial nature. A thought is a thought, a simple appearance. Appearing and disappearing. Everything. And when you notice the grip, when you notice the cling, the grasp, the wanting, you can feel for yourself, recognizing this as a moment of suffering. And with acceptance, with care, we can feel for ourselves in our pain and our fear, wanting something solid. And in feeling for ourselves, we can see the path. We can begin to see where we are gripping, grabbing, tightening, contracting. And now we have a choice. With our mindfulness, we are then wise. And with that wisdom, we can be then compassionate. I don't have to keep holding that hot coal. I can let it go. And may we all be free from this grip, this clinging, this grabbing, holding, solidifying.